There's a moment that arrives quietly, almost like settling into yourself, when you realize you don't need constant company to feel whole. The weekends alone don't feel empty. The dinners, for one, don't feel sad. The silence in your apartment isn't something you're trying to fill. And while everyone around you is making plans, chasing connection, filling every gap with noise, you're sitting in your own space, feeling something most people misunderstand. Peace, not loneliness, not isolation, just the deep, steady peace of being enough for yourself. You've probably felt it, that contentment that comes from solitude, that relief when plans get canceled, that satisfaction in spending hours alone without once feeling like something's missing. And while others worry about you, while they ask if you're okay or suggest you need to get out more, you're wondering why they can't understand that you're not avoiding life, you're just living it differently. People who thrive alone aren't broken. They're not antisocial or damaged or running from connection. They're just wired to recharge in solitude the way others recharge in company. And in a world that treats aloneness like a problem to solve, that difference can feel like a defect, but it's not. It's just a different way of being human. There's a psychology behind this that runs deeper than preference. Because thriving alone isn't about hating people. It's about having a relationship with yourself that's so solid, so complete, that other people become optional instead of necessary. And that's not coldness, that's wholeness. It's the rare ability to generate your own sense of meaning, your own sense of peace, without needing external validation to prove you're doing it right. Psychologists call this autonomy, but that word doesn't capture the full weight of it, because autonomy isn't just about independence, it's about internal completeness. It's about not needing someone else to fill gaps that don't actually exist. It's about realizing that you're not half a person waiting for someone to complete you. You're already whole. And solitude is where you feel that wholeness most clearly. Most people who thrive alone develop this capacity early, not always by choice. Sometimes it was a childhood where relying on others felt unsafe, where connection was unpredictable, where they learned that the only person they could truly count on was themselves. So they built an inner world rich enough to sustain them. And over time, that inner world became more satisfying than most outer ones. But it's not always born from pain. Sometimes it's just temperament. Some people are born with nervous systems that find stimulation draining instead of energizing, where being around others, even people they love, requires energy they'd rather spend differently. And solitude isn't avoidance for them, it's restoration. It's the only place where they don't have to manage anyone else's emotions, read social cues, or perform the version of themselves that makes others comfortable. In solitude, they can just be. Without explanation, without performance, without the exhausting work of being perceivable. There's a particular kind of freedom that comes with thriving alone. Because when you don't need people, you stop tolerating people who drain you. You stop saying yes to invitations out of obligation. You stop maintaining relationships that feel like work. And that selectivity isn't cruelty, it's clarity. It's knowing that your time and energy are finite. And if being alone feels better than being with someone, that person isn't adding value, they're subtracting it. And this creates a strange dynamic. People who thrive alone often have fewer relationships, but the ones they have are deeper because they're not connecting out of loneliness or desperation or fear of being alone. They're connecting because they genuinely want to, because that specific person adds something solitude can't. And that makes the connection real in a way surface-level friendships never are. People who thrive alone often share something in common: a rich internal life. They don't need constant external stimulation because they generate their own. They think deeply, they imagine vividly, they process the world in layers most people skim past. And their thoughts, their ideas, their reflections are engaging enough that they don't need someone else to entertain them. They entertain themselves. Not in a lonely way, in a fulfilled way. And this is what people misunderstand. When someone says they're happy alone, others assume they're lying, assume they're coping, assume they're pretending because admitting loneliness feels like failure. But people who thrive alone aren't pretending. They're not secretly suffering. They genuinely prefer their own company. And that preference isn't sad, it's just different. There's also something about control. Not in a manipulative way, but in the sense that when you're alone, you control your environment, your energy, your pace. You don't have to negotiate. You don't have to compromise. You don't have to adjust yourself to fit someone else's mood or needs. And for people who find that adjustment exhausting, solitude is the only place where they can fully relax, where they don't have to be anything other than exactly what they are. But here's what people who thrive alone also know. Solitude and loneliness are not the same thing. Solitude is chosen. It's intentional. It's the active decision to spend time with yourself because that time feels valuable. Loneliness is imposed. It's the ache of wanting connection and not having it. And people who thrive alone rarely feel lonely, not because they're cold, but because they've built a life where they're never truly alone. They have themselves. And that's enough. I remember the first time I realized I didn't just tolerate being alone, I preferred it. I'd made plans with someone, and they canceled last minute. And instead of disappointment, I felt relief. The evening stretched out in front of me, and instead of feeling empty, it felt full. Full of possibility, of quiet, of the freedom to do exactly what I wanted without considering anyone else. And in that moment, I understood. I wasn't lonely, I was content. And that contentment wasn't something I needed to fix. If you thrive alone, you know that feeling. That sense of coming home to yourself, of sinking into solitude the way others sink into a warm bath. Not because you're avoiding something, but because you're arriving somewhere that feels right. The hardest part about thriving alone is that other people project their fears onto you. They can't imagine being happy without constant company, so they assume you can't be either. They worry about you. They suggest you're missing out. They frame your solitude as a problem that needs solving. And their concern, while well-meaning, is exhausting. Because you're not asking to be saved. You're asking to be understood, to have your way of being accepted instead of pathologized. Here's what most people don't understand. Thriving alone doesn't mean you hate people. It doesn't mean you're incapable of connection. It means you've learned that connection, real connection, is rare. And that settling for shallow connection just to avoid being alone is worse than being alone, because shallow connection is lonelier than solitude. At least in solitude, you're with someone who understands you, yourself. Psychologists talk about something called self-sufficiency. It's the ability to meet your own emotional needs without relying on others to fill them. And people who thrive alone have mastered this in a way most people never do. They've learned to comfort themselves, to motivate themselves, to entertain themselves, to process their emotions without needing someone else to validate them. And that self-sufficiency isn't isolation, it's strength. It's the foundation of a life that doesn't collapse the moment external support disappears. But thriving alone isn't about never wanting connection. It's about wanting connection on your terms. When it's meaningful, when it's genuine, when it adds something instead of draining something. People who thrive alone don't avoid relationships. They're just selective about which ones they invest in, because they know that their solitude is valuable, and they're not willing to trade it for company that feels like a downgrade. So what makes someone thrive alone while others wither in solitude? It's not about being introverted, though that plays a role. It's about having developed an internal world rich enough to sustain you. It's about trusting yourself enough that you don't need constant external validation. It's about knowing that your worth isn't determined by how many people want your company. It's determined by how much you value your own. And once you reach that place, once you stop needing others to make you feel whole, something shifts. You stop chasing connection out of fear. You stop tolerating relationships that don't serve you. You stop apologizing for wanting to be alone. And you start building a life that feels true. Not loud, not full of noise, but true, quiet, yours. Here's the shift that matters. Thriving alone isn't about rejecting people. It's about accepting yourself. It's about realizing that you're not a half person waiting to be completed by someone else. You're already complete. And solitude is where you remember that, where you reconnect with the version of yourself that doesn't need to perform, that doesn't need to explain, that just is. And the more time you spend in that space, the more you realize that most of what you thought you needed from others, you can give yourself. Comfort, understanding, acceptance, peace. It's all available in solitude. And that realization is liberating because it means your happiness isn't dependent on anyone else's presence. It's dependent on yours. People who thrive alone aren't missing out. They're not sad. They're not broken. They're just living according to a different set of needs. Needs that prioritize depth over breadth, quality over quantity, solitude over compromise. And in a world that insists connection is the only path to happiness, that's a radical way to live. But it's also a valid one. And the people who live it know something most people spend their whole lives searching for. That you can be alone without being lonely. That you can thrive in your own company. That you don't need anyone else to make your life feel full because it already is. So if you're someone who thrives alone, stop apologizing for it. Stop letting people make you feel like something's wrong with you because you're content in solitude. Stop forcing yourself to be social just to prove you're not damaged. You're not damaged. You're just different. And that difference is a strength, not a flaw. You don't need to be surrounded by people to matter. You don't need constant connection to prove you're alive. You don't need to fill your calendar to fill your life, because your life is already full. With your thoughts, your interests, your peace, your presence. And that's enough. You're not avoiding the world. You're just choosing yourself. And there's nothing sad about that. There's nothing lonely about that. There's just the quiet, steady truth that you've learned that most people never do. That the best company you'll ever have is your own. And once you know that, really know that, you're free. Free to connect when you want to, free to retreat when you need to, free to live a life that's yours, solitary, peaceful, whole. And that's not loneliness, that's liberation.